8. A full disclosure. Mrs. Peters did make good on her intent to fix my faulty relationship with her daughter. It wasn't too long before I received an invitation to Sunday lunch at the Peters household in Oxford, Ohio. This was a well-established black family who had been living in this part of Ohio for at least 4 generations. Mrs. Peters came through the ranks of an elementary teacher at Kramer Elementary School before retirement. Kramer was one of 3 elementary schools in the Talawanda School District, with the highest student-to-teacher ratio of 17 in the district. Mrs. Peters was proud of her experience in Kramer, even though it was predominantly white. Minority enrollment at Kramer was 15% of the student body, mostly black and Hispanic, which, by the way, was significantly lower than the Ohio State average of 33%, majority minority black. But then this ratio reflected both the community and the university which sustained it. Mr. Peters, on the other hand, had risen through the ranks to become the deputy superintendent of the Talawanda School District. This was a family steeped in the education system of Southern Ohio. I was attempting to arrive for 1 p.m., but was startled that I could not find a parking space close enough to their residence. Just then, my phone rang. It was Gwen. "Eric, where are you? We are all here and ready to go." "Yes, babes. I am driving around looking for a parking space." I could hear her mom in the background instructing Adrian, that was her younger brother, to move up the cars so that I can park in the driveway. "Tell him to drive in and park in the driveway," she called out. So now I was also going to meet her little brother. The only information I had of this young man was that he was 17, I believe, but he had done the right thing and moved away to attend the University of Cincinnati, about 40 miles away. Far enough to be outside the influence of his parents, and I suppose his big sister, but not that far that he could not drop in for Sunday lunch. As I drove in the driveway, there was Gwen, looking radiant as usual, waiting at the open door. Now, Gwen and I had not spoken much that week, but it wasn't as a result of our less than happy parting after the theater date. It was because I had become extremely busy, as this was the week of homecoming at Miami. Every fall, homecoming is celebrated by the 15,000 Miami University students, joined on campus by hundreds of faculty, staff, community members, and alumni in commemorating the university's rich traditions. The 3 most important ones being the homecoming parade of floats, the signal football game, hopefully against a team that Miami can beat. We don't want anything to dampen the enthusiasm of the day. Crowned by an evening concert by some international artists. In my case, I had become preoccupied with helping my best friend Michael. You see, Michael's girlfriend was big in Zeta Phi Beta, one of the few female African American Greek communities on the campus. They were presenting a float in this year's parade, and all of the ladies had enlisted their boyfriends to assist in building the float, more like building it themselves with the ladies overseeing the operation. They were running up against their deadline and needed extra help. Michael had dragged me in to assist. For this week leading up to the big day on Saturday, this was my activity every night from 6 p.m., sometimes past midnight. I had asked Michael if they were going to allow any of the guys who helped to build this monstrosity to ride in it during the parade. He said this wasn't usual, but this year was an exception. What was the theme? This year, it was the strength and beauty of melanin. I laughed. I suppose the women will be the beauty and the men will be the strength. Yeah, something like that, Michael cajoled. But you won't fit in. At the pinnacle of the float will be two persons who they say have to look black. Like very black. Okay, right. Having not communicated with Gwen for 1 week, I was prepared with my compliments for Gwen. As I entered the house, I hugged her and told her how special she looked. She did the short introductions, but there was one other person at lunch that day that I did not expect to see, and he did not expect to see me either. It was Father Charles Barkely, the assistant curate at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church on Walnut Street. Oh, I know, Eric. How are you, my man? I have not seen you on the track these last couple of weeks. Yes, I know. I have been busy helping my best friend build a float for the parade. Actually, Father Chuck, as I knew him, and I went back much longer than anyone there would realize. I met him on the tracks just after I had quit the team. I was very concerned about keeping in shape and found running a means of abating the anxiety that was mounting during the last term of my previous academic year, with my grandma becoming sick. As I told you, she eventually passed away and I began to run out of money. So there were lots of anxiety that needed to be suppressed. Father Charles Barkely was the assistant curate at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church in East Walnut Street in Oxford. He had just been ordained a priest at the age of 26 by the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Southern Ohio and had been assigned to Holy Trinity Church. He hailed from South Carolina and soon found himself in a very peculiar situation for an unmarried Episcopal priest. Most priests in the Episcopal Church are encouraged to get married and start a family before embarking fully on their ministry life. Barkely was very conscious of this. Because he was athletic, tall, very well built, attractive, he soon found himself constantly fending off undesirable attention from young parishioners or their parents, mostly their moms. He had confided most of this in me by the time summer had come. So obviously, I wondered whether Gwen's mom was one of the parents putting her daughter forward as a possible match for this handsome guy in the clerical collar. It could have been either he was there to send a message to me, or I was there to send a message to him. I quickly banished such thoughts because they would do me no good. If either of these propositions were true, where would that leave me? I remembered all of the themes that Gwen and I witnessed in that most recent play about insights versus blindness, faith versus free will, and actions versus punishments, and said to myself, just forget about it. Now everyone was already positioned around the dinner table, just waiting for me to join and the good Father Barkely to say the prayer. We all started to dive into the food, which was good and abundant, and I wondered when and by whom the conversation was going to begin. Well, Eric, we are all anxiously waiting to find out more about you, her mom broke the ice. Oh, what would you like to know? I sheepishly asked. Her dad came in forcefully. Well, a lot of things. For instance, were you ever homeless, sleeping on the streets in this town? And how is it that you are driving around in an expensive European car? How did you swing all of this? Daddy, where did you get all that sort of stuff? That was Gwen, in an apparent attempt to come to my defense. I was in the barber shop the other day when this fellow approached me and said, "Sir, do you have any idea who your daughter is running around town with?" And then he proceeded to tell me all of these tales. So, Mr. Eric, enlighten me, if you will, please. A silence came over the table, as if everyone was eagerly awaiting the announcement of the coming of a great light. Well, Mr. Peters, I don't know what else your barbershop guy may have told you. But as to the few things that you have just mentioned, they are all correct. I could see Gwen and her mother with their mouths aghast. But strangely, little Adrian never stopped eating. I took my time in explaining to this gathering how I had excelled in track and field, then lost my major support anchor, my grandma, and ended up stranded on the streets of Oxford for 6 days. Then I was rescued by the very professor that I had spent my last 2 weeks of freedom helping to settle into this community. Why do you call him your dad then? He has no relationship to you. I could understand that query coming from Mr. Peters, who himself was a dad. He only understood the role in a biological sense. Well, Mr. Peters, he is the only relationship I have right now besides my girlfriend, Gwen. I'm not so sure how that went down, but I had to slip it in sideways, keeping in mind the dubious presence of the vicar. It just surprised me how people seem to be unbelieving when I will explain how, in coming out of unconsciousness in the operating room at the university hospital, I worried that if I were to be discharged, it would be back to living on the streets of Oxford. So I started to pretend that the professor was my father and began asking the nurses to bring my father. They, the nurses, thought that maybe the toxins had gotten to my brain and sent for him to test whether I would recognize him. Of course, I wasn't mad. I was just being anxious about a future that I truly believed I would not survive a second time. When he entered that room, I was in tears, apologizing to him that I lied to the nurses. He stopped me right away, gave me a kiss, and said that was a father kissing his son. I pulled him back towards me and returned the kiss, telling him that it was from a grateful son, acknowledging the love of his father. He then said, "From now on, don't ever refer to me as Doc or Prof. I am your father from now on, and you must respect that." And he meant it. I have been most happy to comply. I drive the car, and every now and then, when I have a problem, he comes in and solves it. He got me back into school. He got me my financing. He found where my girlfriend ate her lunch and is responsible for me being at this generous table today. Is there something wrong in I calling him my dad? Gwen's dad broke the silence by saying, "I am sorry, Eric, I did not know any of this. I was going to say that you are a very lucky man, but I think that it is your dad that is the lucky one. As you can see, my son hardly ever notices me." Everyone burst out in laughter as young Adrian, with his mouth half full, muttered, "What, Dad? Did you say something?" "Don't choke on your food, Adrian," his father responded. Everyone broke out in laughter again. I ended up driving the priest back to his residence. On the way back, he wanted to get my phone number. You know, there's something very spiritual about your experience, Eric. You should join the youth club at the church. In fact, I need to speak seriously with you. You need to become a member of our church, really. From that day on, Father Barkely and I became very close friends, exchanging ideas on social, political, and sports events.